This morning, the Supreme Court heard arguments about whether it is constitutional for Mississippi to ban abortions after 15 weeks of pregnancy. This is by far the biggest threat to Roe versus Wade in almost 3 decades. I'm here today to sound the alarm and call on my colleagues to stand with me to protect the health of America's women. There is every reason to think that extreme justices on the Supreme Court are poised to either overturn Roe or fatally undermine it. If the Supreme Court gets rid of Roe, which has been the law of the land for 5 decades, each individual state will decide whether to let women control their own bodies and their own lives. Without Roe, abortion will be immediately illegal in about 12 states, and more than a dozen others will likely put severe abortion restrictions in place. It's even possible that a future Republican Congress would try to restrict abortion nationally. Now, you know reproductive rights have been protected for so long in the United States that it's been easy for us to forget what happens when we don't safeguard them. But when women cannot control what reproductive care they receive, their health suffers. Their physical, emotional, and economic health, and the health and welfare of their entire families. We can see that right now in Texas, where a new law creates incentives for vigilantes to pry into their neighbors' lives by letting anyone sue who would aid and abet abortions and get a $10,000 reward for doing so. Texas doctors have reported that they are afraid to give essential medical advice to women at risk of life-threatening complications in their pregnancies. One woman in Texas was even refused care for her ectopic pregnancy, which cannot be carried to term and must be terminated to save the patient's life. Women seek access to reproductive care for all kinds of reasons that are personal and intimate and sometimes heartbreaking. And Americans understand this. They get it. 3 out of every 4 of us, including the vast majority of Nevadans, agree that the people who should be making decisions about pregnancies are women and their doctors. It's unthinkable to me, then, that the court is on the verge of taking that decision away from women and medical professionals and giving it to politicians instead. If Roe versus Wade is overturned, nearly half of women nationwide will see the nearest clinic close. The average distance to the nearest reproductive health care clinic will go up by more than 10 times, from 25 miles to 279 miles. Now, if you've ever worked for minimum wage, you know that taking days to travel across state lines for health care is a luxury that many Americans can't afford. That's reality for many low-income women, including women of color. We have to stop treating women's health care as optional. In Nevada, and Madam President, you know this better than anyone in the Senate, we have worked hard to protect reproductive health. In the 90s, we passed a ballot initiative to enshrine choice into law. And more recently, in Nevada, we've done away with the kind of restrictions on abortion that are popping up in state after state. But make no mistake, as long as there are active efforts to eliminate the right to choose, whether in the courts or in Congress, the reproductive freedom of women everywhere is in jeopardy. We must do everything we can to protect a woman's right to choose. That's why it is so vital that Congress pass the Women's Health Protection Act. This bill would outlaw bans and other medically unnecessary restrictions on abortion across the country. It would mean that states could impose medically unnecessary ultrasounds. They could not impose medically unnecessary ultrasounds, excessive waiting periods, and other extreme burdens on healthcare providers intended to limit abortion access. It would guarantee women control over their reproductive decisions in consultation with medical professionals. Now, that's what 3/4 of us think is right. I will do everything I can in the Senate to protect women in Nevada and across this country. And I would hope, Madam President, that our colleagues would join us. Thank you. I yield the floor, and I notice the absence of a quorum.
The clerk will call the roll.
Ms. Baldwin.